Hey, what's up, YouTube? So, I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about my bandsaw shenanigans from last weekend. Do a little quick intro to the bandsaw, though, real fast. This is a 10-inch Rikon. It's their bottom line bandsaw. The bearings that are on this bandsaw are just skateboard bearings. They're 626Z. It's just a shielded skateboard bearings, all it is. The ID is 6 millimeters. The OD is 20 millimeters, I believe. They might be 22, I don't remember. These things are stupid, dirt cheap pennies. They're not expensive at all. Now, the bolts that those ride on from the factory are 5 millimeter 0.8 pitch bolts with a 6 millimeter shoulder for the bearing to ride on. I just kind of keep an eye out on the bearings. When they start to get a little crunchy, I'll start swapping the crunchy ones out, which is not real often. Probably once a year I'll go through all the bearings and just check them out and see which ones need to be replaced. And at that point, going through that trouble, I usually just go ahead and replace them all. I buy these bearings in bulk. They're super cheap, pack of 10. I usually buy 2 packs, and they last forever. I've only had to do that twice, and I've had the bandsaw for 3-4 years, something like that. So anyway, I was doing that last weekend, going through swapping all the bearings out, and I got to the thrust bearing on the top, and that bolt broke right there. I opted for trying to source these parts locally, and I could not source this exact bolt locally. And the thought occurred to me too, rather than having a 5 millimeter stud with a 6 millimeter shoulder, why not just go with a 6 millimeter bolt? So that's what I did, and that's what these black bolts are. They're 6 millimeter bolt that fits the bearing really, really nicely. If I can get some light on that for you. Yeah, they fit that bearing real nice. And the little cylinders that they're sitting on, I tapped them out to the same thread and size to fit these bolts. And since these bolts were bigger and they wouldn't fit through the block, I had to file that open to make them fit. And then just put it all back together. And at that point, I can show you my bandsaw setup, my bandsaw guide setup, which is a little bit different. Most people will tell you to stick a piece of paper between the bearing and the blade and have an actual gap in there. I don't use a gap. So my setup's a little bit finicky. It's a little bit harder to set up, but once you get it set up, it makes the bandsaw really, really accurate. If I turn this by hand, you can see all 3 of those bearings are moving. There's no wiggle room. It's touching all 3 bearings. Now, there's no tension between the bearings and the blade. They're not actually pushing on that blade. So if I turn it and put my thumb on the bearing, you can see I can stop that bearing. And I set it up so that I can do that to all 3. So I know they're all touching the blade, but none of them are actually pressing on that blade. So that makes this thing track really, really accurately. Now the key to that, if you're going to do this, is you back off all 6 bearings. You're going to back off the bottom ones, you're going to back off the top ones so that nothing is touching that blade. And then you're going to get the blade tracking on just the wheels perfectly. And then you just bring these up to just touching that blade. Well, as far as the blade is concerned, it's still tracking just on the wheels alone. And these things are only coming into play when you're trying to force a workpiece through the blade. So, pros and cons. Pros, this thing's really accurate. That blade does not wiggle, it doesn't bounce in between, I don't get drift. The cons, it's loud. But if you're running dust collection, which in my case is a shop vac, that's loud anyway. So I'm not worried about the noise. The other one is it's a little bit harder on these bearings. Now, again, like I said before, I only do these bearings about once a year. So I'm not concerned about it. these are about the cheapest bearings you can come across. So you guys with the bigger bandsaws that have the bigger bearings, that may be different for you guys. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Appreciate you guys watching. You guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you on the next one. So it's loud. But I can stop the bearings. Boy, the safety trolls are going to get me for that one. So anyway, that demonstrates what I'm talking about.